lot of time to go. These cars are taking one terrific pounding.
A 911 is not really a 911 unless it ends up on a racetrack at some point. At least that seems to be what Porsche has espoused over the last 60 years. So in that same sense, the 930, the turbo, gave birth to all these other variants on the racetrack. Most people know the 935 as the Moby Dick because it had this huge whale tail. Like, this is the whale tail for the street car, but the whale tail for the race car was like 2 feet longer. And then they had this really long protracted front nose. And that 935 was the basis for a ton of cars that won at Le Mans, at Daytona, all these other places. You had lots of people like Hurley Haywood. It was a very long tenured car, and people ran the 935 forever. Before that, they ran the 934. The 934 was very close to a street car, but it had a complete hot rod engine. So it looked a little bit more like this. And instead of being based off an RS car, like the 1973 RS or the 1974 RSR, a turbocharged engine allowed them to have a smaller engine and make bigger horsepower to compete with cars like the Corvette and the Ferrari Testarossas and stuff like that. So the 934 was really successful and ran under really iconic liveries like the Jägermeister car, the Interscope car, of course, the Brumos car. So Brumos was one of the dealerships actually in Florida that, as I don't know, the same way I would try to do it, try to say, hey, if we race with you guys, can we get a store? Can we get cooler cars, stuff like that? So they had an actual business that supported the racing, and the racing supported the business. And this is one of the best examples of the win on Sunday, sell on Monday thing. So Hurley Haywood and Peter Gregg ran the Brumos 59 car a lot, and that's the one that a lot of people have seen where it's painted white with like a red stripe and a blue stripe. And that was like this kind of era as well. So this was the road car that supported Porsche's, entries into these different things. And then eventually they had what was called like a 934.5. So the 934.5 was basically a monster engine with 700 or 800 horsepower inside of a 934 body, but it wasn't a full 935. So this car lasted so long that they raced it for like 10 years straight, which now race cars become obsolete every 3 or 4 year cycle, or they do like an Evo kit or something like that. But back in the day, the Porsche was so successful and most importantly, reliable. So for 12-hour races and 24-hour races, they were able to push these cars to the limit and win at places like Sebring, which is one of the ultimate torture chambers for drivers and cars.
I'm getting an accident report from the S's. Car 59, Peter Gregg has flipped. Gregg has flipped in the S's. Gregg is out of the car and okay. Tough break for Peter Gregg.
It's so bumpy, it's so fast, it's humid, there's all these other things that are going on, and it really is one of the craziest tracks. But this is where the 930, the 934, the 935, all those cars were shining as a result of that. Their reliability allowed them to push the engineering envelope further and further and further, because what Porsche has done time and again is taken this basic, geometry of the flat six engine and tweaked it to make it more sustainable at higher horsepower loads for longer periods of time. There's still a lot of people today that are vintage racing 934s, 930s, 934.5s, and their 935s. When you go to something like Rennsport Reunion, or you go to the Pebble Beach Concourse Car Week, and you see the historic races, there's tons of 911 turbo-based cars in all those classes. Because it's just such a successful platform, and you can get parts for it. Porsche Motorsports in Los Angeles still supports these cars and still supports the race cars. So if you need stuff rebuilt, whether it's a transmission, brakes, or your engine overhauled to get a little bit more horsepower, you can still send your car down to Carson and they will rebuild it for you. For a fee, of course, as everything is with Porsche. But it is really just a great thing where you feel when you're driving on the highway and you're going 100 miles an hour on one of these things, this is kind of the same noise, kind of the same engine, kind of the same overall vibe if you were racing, at one of these races, because the car is so similar. They have history, and some of the most famous drivers drove these cars. in all these series where they would take a NASCAR guy, an IndyCar guy, a Formula One car guy, and they would slam them into the car. A 12-hour race at Sebring, a 6-hour race at Spa in Europe, or whatever it was. And this was the car that so many of those people, would show up to race because they knew they could finish. And if you can finish as a race car driver, you have a chance to win. And that's really one of the most important things.